Hello, here Al Nilein News as we cover the breaking news from Sudan.
Cairo hosts Egyptian-Sudanese talks. Egypt asserts red lines on Sudanese unity and supports legitimate state institutions. Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Professor Kamel Idris, Prime Minister of the Transitional Government of Sudan, held bilateral discussions today in Cairo. The Egyptian side reaffirmed its firm commitment to Egypt's defined red lines regarding the protection of Sudan's unity and territorial integrity. Crucially, Egypt reiterated its full support for the legitimate institutions of the Sudanese state, notably the Transitional Sovereign Council led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the transitional government headed by Prime Minister Idris. A central theme of the talks was the mobilization of support for Sudan's reconstruction efforts, which both nations deemed a critical national priority and an urgent prerequisite for sustainable stability. Egypt expressed keen interest in contributing to reconstruction projects throughout Sudan. In this context, Egypt welcomed a request from Sudan and assisted in developing a new administrative city, echoing Egypt's successful model in this field. Significantly, Egypt and Sudan reached a definitive agreement on the protection of their shared water security as downstream nations of the Nile River. Both countries vowed to collaborate closely to uphold their full water rights and entitlements in accordance with the 1959 agreement and international law. They jointly called upon Ethiopia to abandon unilateral actions concerning the Nile and to strictly adhere to the established principles of the international law. Egypt and Sudan also emphasized the importance of harmonizing their positions in all regional and international forums concerning Nile River issues. UN Rights Chief warns of chronicle of cruelty in Sudan as civilian deaths surge. In a sobering address to the 61st session of the Human Rights Council, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk described Sudan as a land of despair, unveiling a report that documents a staggering escalation in violence and systematic abuses against the Sudanese population. The High Commissioner's report highlights a catastrophic 2025, noting that documented civilian killings have increased by more than 250% compared to the previous year. Attacks on infrastructure, a significant portion of the High Commissioner's testimony, focused on the devastating impact of the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) operations. Turk, who visited Sudan earlier this year, noted that the RSF has repeatedly utilized advanced long-range drones to strike critical civilian infrastructure. An attack by the RSF on electrical infrastructure in Kosti early last year crippled water treatment systems, allowing cholera to spread like wildfire, Turk stated. He further detailed the carnage following the RSF's capture of the Zamzam camp and its offensive on al-Fashir, citing acts that amount to war crimes and possible crimes against humanity. The report paints a harrowing picture of the plight of Sudanese women and girls whose bodies have been weaponized to terrorize communities. In 2025 alone, the UN identified over 500 victims of sexual violence, including gang rape, sexual torture, sexual slavery, and documented cases resulting in death. The High Commissioner expressed grave concern over the high-tech nature of the war run by mercenaries fueled by foreign sponsors and modern weaponry. Humanitarian aid convoys and health workers are being targeted by RSF militias, cutting off the country's last lifelines. Hate speech and the recruitment of child soldiers are rapidly eroding the social fabric of the nation. Turk criticized the international community's passive stance, calling for a fundamental shift in the global moral compass. He urged for the full enforcement of the arms embargo in Darfur and advocated for the UN Security Council to refer the situation across all of Sudan to the International Criminal Court. We must reverse this flow. Let aid in and keep weapons out, Turk implored, hitting on Hamidati Daglo family, noting that the war is driven by the greed of a few. Sudan PM advisor blames British colonial legacy for current conflict continuity. Mohammed Khair, chief advisor to Sudanese Prime Minister Professor Kamal Idris, has ignited a firestorm of debate across political circles and social media following provocative remarks linking Sudan's current crisis to British colonial influence. Appearing on an Auda podcast, Khair characterized the ongoing war as an extension of a historical British project, going as far as to describe the current situation as a British invasion in its geopolitical essence. Khair argued that the roots of the modern Sudanese crisis lie in the administrative frameworks established during the colonial era. He specifically targeted the social fabric of the conflict, claiming that tribal leaders currently aligned with the Rapid Support Forces are the descendants of tribal figures who collaborated with the British administration. According to the advisor, the current crisis reflects a persistence of historical influence embedded within Sudan's social and political structures by Britain to maintain long-term leverage. The advisor Mohammed Khair, who belongs to the Union Democratic Party, traced the origins of the instability back to the historical Anglo-Egyptian rivalry over Sudan. He alleged that colonial authorities empowered specific tribal leaderships to create political frameworks that obstructed the path to true independence. Khair highlighted the specific geographic corridor to support his thesis, the belt stretching from Darfur in the west through Jazeera State. The claim Khair asserts that the social composition of this belt remains the same demographic pillar that Britain relied upon historically. In the precedent, he explicitly named the Socialist Republican Party, a colonial-era entity, as a prime example of a political force built on these British-backed tribal foundations. The statements have met with a polarized reception. Critics argue that Khair's narrative over-relies on historical grievances to deflect from immediate internal failures and the role of contemporary regional actors in the war. Supporters, conversely, view his analysis as a necessary decolonial lens that explains the structural nature of power and conflict in the country.